in two 40-foot containers. Welcome to News Central Live from our studio here at Adesanwe Kanda in Accra. I am Martin Siedu. That is a few minutes past midday, and it's because we've been bringing you live coverage of the Minister for Government Communications, Felix Kwakye-Ofosu, who's been answering a myriad of questions across sectors on major national conversations where journalists who had gathered there thought that they needed some clarity or answers too. So we will go back in a moment to try and get answers to some of the questions regarding the former Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta's detention in the United States. Let's see if he is actually answering that question and what his words are.
Most corruption scandals stem out of procurement. The desire for people, public officials, to engage in procurement. That's where the bulk of corruption occurs. So there must be a system that checks this, and the president has established the commitment authorization through the finance minister. So every procurement within a certain threshold that needs to be done must obtain commitment authorization. If you don't get it, the finance minister is simply not going to pay. That is what it means. Through that process, you are then able to scrutinize the request for procurement, the processes, and flag any unlawful acts or any acts that have the likelihood to lead the activity even before it occurs. But that happens if you have strict oversight, and that is currently what is happening. That is why you don't find corruption happening, because you are not at liberty to do as you please. You must go through a system that is robust to check any excesses. You recall that the minister also announced the setting up of the Value for Money Office, which will be a body set up to look into the value of all government procurement. So that when you say that this spend costs 100 cedis, it is examined to ascertain whether or not it is true that the true value of this spend is 100 cedis. That office will also provide an additional layer of scrutiny and checks and balances on public procurement. So corruption is fought through a systems approach. It is not ad hoc. It is not by bold and lofty declarations. It has to be done through firm action, and that is what is happening. So these systems will continue to be strengthened. The president has also indicated that even if somebody is able to slip through this robust and watertight arrangement, he will take swift action to ensure that even as we hold past public officials accountable, officials in this government will be held accountable. In fact, it is the most important aspect of the fight against corruption, to be able to deal with corruption in one's own government. If that is done, you wouldn't even need to pursue former government officials, because the accountability system is such that once it occurs, it will be addressed. That is what President Mahama seeks to set up in the period that he remains government. Of course, the affirmative action law is dear to President Mahama's heart, and he consistently works to ensure that it comes to fruition and that all the provisions in there are adhered to, so that our women folk take their rightful place in the efforts to build Ghana, and they make their deserved contribution. The Commander Sugar Factory is still being worked on. It is important to carry out an assessment of the state of the factory. The intent was for sugar to be produced there, so that we cut down on the large volumes of sugar imports as a way of even addressing the problems with the exchange, because you need foreign currency to be able to do this importation if it is coming from outside the country. So the Communal Sugar Factory was set up to bridge that gap. Unfortunately, we finished setting it up just before we left office in 2016. What was left was for the cultivation of a plantation, and then a system to offtake from outgrowers to feed the factory. The MPP failed to do that and left the factory in a state of disrepair. Once we took over, it was necessary to assess the situation and look for the best approach to get the factory to become operational. I'm confident that the trade minister, when she takes her turn at this program next week, will shed light on the status of the Commander Sugar Factory and indicate clearly what government is doing to bring it back to fruition. Let me indicate that there's no office of prophecy What it is that there's a designated official who liaises with the religious community, because it's an important section of society, and the government has to be sensitive to the beliefs and aspirations of its people. So there's an officer who has the mandate to liaise with religious organizations. For a long time, the Ghanaian public has become concerned about the proliferation of prophets, especially on the 31st December. And all manner of claims are made, some of which sometimes defy understanding and what have you. It was important to put in place a structured system so that whatever claims are made are examined, so that people do not use that as an avenue to create needless panic and exploit people, what have you. So that is what it is about. It is not an office dedicated to prophecy, no. It's an office dedicated to maintaining relations between governments and an important section of society, which is the religious community. That is what it is. Ken Ofori-Atta, like all public officials, we are subject to scrutiny. So whether you are in government or outside government, once you have served in public office, you must be open to scrutiny and accountability. There are many public officials, including some who served under President Mahama during his first tenure, who were subjected to all manner of judicial processes with a view to exerting accountability from them. And Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta was in government when that happened. So I see no reason why he should seek to evade accountability when similar questions are. Indeed, President Mahama himself was a subject of investigations. I'm sure you remember that. He subjected himself to investigations. He was interviewed by the special prosecutor. Eventually, it was found that the allegations were unfounded and nothing untoward had happened in that particular matter. So he is working a free man. So if Ken Ofori-Atta is confident that indeed he has done nothing untoward, I think that he should avail himself to the appropriate authorities to carry out their investigations. Indeed, the Attorney General has indicated that he has sent a formal extradition request to the authorities in the United States of America who are processing it. Along the line, because of the concerns raised by the Ghanaian government, I think that his visa was revoked, which then made it an issue for ICE. So he is currently in detention. We are aware that on the 20th of this month, he will be appearing in court. Depending on the outcome of the court proceedings, I think that the appropriate steps will be taken. But the Ghanaian government is interested in holding all public officials to account. And if the investigative authorities believe that there's a basis to investigate, I think they should be encouraged to carry out that investigation. Rents.
Right, so you heard the Minister for Government Communications, Felix Kwakye-Ofosu, giving answers to a number of questions, and the last bit you just heard has to do with Ken Ofori-Atta, who is in detention in the United States of America. Well, let's go to some of the big stories we have for you this afternoon on News Central. And the Gambia Reparations Commission has announced that it has commenced the payment of reparations to victims of human rights violation which was committed between July 1994 and January 2017. A press release issued by the Commission said this marks a significant milestone in its mandate to facilitate justice, restore dignity, and support the recovery of victims who endured violations during the specified period. It will be recalled that more than 44 Ghanaians and other nationals were killed in 2005 during the Yahya Jammeh administration in the Gambia. Reports indicate that on the 22nd of July 2005, Gambia security forces arrested migrants who were bound for Europe after their boat landed in the Gambia on suspicion of involvement in a coup attempt. Almost all the migrants, including some 44 Ghanaians, 9 Nigerians, 2 Togolese, and nationals of Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal, were killed in the Gambia or taken across the border into Senegal and shot, and their bodies dumped in wells. The Gambia Reparations Commission was created in 2017 to investigate abuses, collect testimonies from victims and witnesses, and work towards transitional justice and reconciliation. And I recall this story very vividly because it was in the early days of my journalism career and was one of the stories that I had to work on. So let's try and get some perspective to this. Let's speak to William Nyako, who is the Executive Director for the Africa Center for International Law and Accountability, and also the Coordinator for the Jame to Justice Ghana Coalition. Mr. Nyako, good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us on TV3. Hello, Mr. William Nyako. Can you hear me? Well, we'll do well to get that connection back to William Nyako, who is joining us to speak to this subject where, you know, last few hours we got information about the fact that some Africans, I should say generally, some Africans who were arrested in the Gambia between 2005 were killed, you know, unfortunately because of the, they were arrested and killed. They were actually on their way to Europe, but the boat on which they were traveling made a stop at the Gambia. The then president of the Gambia, Yahya Jammeh, said that they suspected them to be coup makers or persons who were plotting a coup d'etat. So all of the individuals in question, 44 of them were told were Ghanaians, 9 Nigerians, and a number of other African nationals. All of them were killed by Gambia security forces. And the then President Yahya Jammeh, later on, after several years of persuasion and pressure, agreed to the fact that, well, they probably were actually not coup makers, but regular Africans who were seeking greener pastures, unfortunately passed through the Gambia and fell victim to that unfortunate incident. So as it stands, we are being told that the Gambia has agreed to pay some compensation. And on your screens now, a few minutes ago, you saw Yahya Jammeh when he was president. A few hours ago, we got information that they have agreed to now start paying reparations to families of the victims and the countries that they were from following the unfortunate killing of these African nationals. Majority of them, we're told, were Ghanaians. So that is why this is of particular interest to Ghana. The then Foreign Affairs Minister, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, was one of the key advocates putting pressure on the Gambia to make the necessary payments. But as it stands, clarity has been given as to when the payment will start. So we'll update you as and when we do get William Nyako on the line. Let's shift our attention now to the courts now, because the Accra High Court has granted Kwejo Owusu Bempa, the general manager of Akonta Mining, a bail of 10 million Ghana cedis with 3 sureties, 1 to be justified. Kwejo Owusu Bempa, together with the NPP Ashanti Regional Chairman, Bernard Ntwibo-Esiako, also known as Chairman Wontumi, are among 5 persons accused and have been charged with multiple mining offenses, including felling of trees in a forest reserve, abetting and aiding the construction of unauthorized structures at the Tano Nimrim Forest Reserve. In a moment, we'll speak to Lord Edu Asare, who is our man in court and has been following this for us. Lord Edu Asare, thank you for your time. So walk us through what exactly transpired in court today.
Well, Martin, you realize that Chairman Wontumi, the NPP Ashanti Regional Chair, he has multiple cases here at the Accra High Court. So there's the one that has to do with the legal activities at the Samaboy Forest Reserve. And this one has to do with the Tano Green Forest Reserve. Now, in this matter, there are 5 accused persons, and that includes Chairman Wontumi and then 4 others. So Kwejo Owusu Bempa, the last time we caught, the prosecution said that he was at large and that he had been on the run, but he came to court today because he had been arrested on Monday, and so the court took his plea. He had 3 charges plotted against him, and which were undertaking the mining without license, abetting the unauthorized felling of trees in the forest, and then abetting unauthorized erection of structures in the forest. Now, he pleaded not guilty to these charges, and then his lawyer went ahead to plead for a pay for bail for him. The prosecution indicated that he had been arrested on Monday, like I indicated earlier. Now, in granting the bill, the presiding judge in the matter is 10 million to be with which to be justified. He's supposed to deposit his passports to the court registry. And so that is what we know for now. But been speaking to his lawyer, Andrew Vosia, and he had been indicated that essentially his client was not on the run as had been stipulated earlier. He didn't even know that he was in a charge if he heard about it later and then turned himself in. But in the end, he got arrested because he could not, as it were, meet the conditions that the investigators have set for him. You can listen to him.
Basically, we are in court because of my client, who is the fifth accused person, Kujo Usubempa. He saw somebody sent him a screenshot of a charge sheet that he's at large. So, having gotten that information, then he got in touch with me, and he came to Accra. And I took him to police headquarters about 3 weeks ago. He was interrogated, his statement taken, he was cautioned on 3 counts, and the police admitted him to bail. So he left, and we reported, I think, the next day. So after reporting, they gave him another time to report, but he fell sick. And at all that moment, he was at the hospital. So having recovered with a medical report, we reported on Monday, on the 12th, to the police. Then they said because he has breached the previous reporting, they are taking him to court today. So he was detained from Monday, and today we are in court.
Okay, so the substantive matter, what is his offense?
Yeah, he was charged with count 3, count 5, and count 7. Count 3 has got something to do with illegal mining in the forest. Then he was alleged to have abetted felling of trees at Nimri Forest around Samobor. Then he abetted a building, put up a structure. That's a building in the forest. So those are the 3 offenses he was charged with: illegal mining, unauthorized felling, abatement of unauthorized felling of trees, then abatement of building a structure in the forest, for which he pleaded not guilty on all the 3 counts. And he was admitted to bail in the sum of 10 million Ghana cedis with 3 sureties, 1 to be justified.
Because he indicated that he was unwell, for which reason he could not appear before the police when he was requested. Did you show any medical reports to sort of appease the investigators?
Yes, in fact, I gave a copy of the medical report to the investigator. He had an accident in 2022 and had a spinal cord problem.
Right, so you heard that lawyer who is representing the third accused, one of the accused persons in the Akonta mining case. Lord, thank you very much for bringing some updates on that from the courts for us. Let's take our attention now to our earlier story having to do with news we got last few hours about the Gambia agreeing to pay some reparations to victims who unfortunately lost their lives in the Gambia. Mr. Nyako has finally joined us. A bit of background for those who are just joining us. Between January 2005, some Ghanaians who were traveling with other African nationals fell victim to human rights abuses in the Gambia. They were killed, 44 of them Ghanaians and other African nationals. And what we are hearing is that Gambia has agreed to make some payments. Mr. Nyako, thank you for your time. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
It's been a very long journey. We finally have at least a semblance of clarity as to when payment will be done or how payment will be done and some reparations. What do you make of how far this case has traveled and the fact that there is some finality we are getting in this last few days?
Well, it's a significant step forward considering how far this case has traveled. And as you know, there's been, for the many Gambian issues, it started back when Yahya Jammeh became president back in 1994. So a lot of the atrocities, including crimes against humanity, unlawful killings, torture, rape, and all of that. A lot of them were suffered by Gambians. But it wasn't until 2005 when Ghana, unfortunately, our fellow Ghanaians, more than 44 were caught in it, along with about 15 West African nationals, including Nigerians, Togolese, and Ivorians, who were trying to use an unapproved route through Senegal to Gambia to Europe. They were accosted. Information was that they were mercenaries. Information that had been given to Yahya Jammeh was that they were mercenaries seeking to overthrow Yahya Jammeh. But when they were arrested, they didn't have any equipment, nothing. They just had Gary and the rest. So they should have been taken through the court system, but that did not happen. They were summarily executed, many of them, with a few remaining who escaped. So this matter has traveled from in the Ghana case, the 2005, until back in 2009 during President Mills' time, there was some money paid to the government of Ghana to give it to organize a burial and to give some of the victims some, but they never accepted. Gambia never accepted responsibility until when Yahya Jammeh left office and civil society, including our own campaign, we uncovered evidence that the orders to kill these Ghanaians were actually given by Yahya Jammeh. And since then, there was the establishment of the Truth Reconciliation Commission, where some of our victims presented, they shared their experiences of what happened. And the TRC recommended, among other things, that they should be paid about $650,000 US, and that Yahya Jammeh and 12 of his co-conspirators should be brought to trial. After that, they had to establish
Right. Mr. Nyako, we seem to have your connection has frozen, so you were just giving us a context and a background to what exactly happened between then and now. And that's quite a substantial amount.
That have started going on, including one, a legal domestic framework. Parliament of the Gambia National Assembly passed this, establishing the framework. And then because this would involve international actors, ECOWAS last December approved the establishment of the Special Court of the Gambia to try those crimes. So the money part is one bit, but the justice part, which is what I would call Gambia 2.0, would be to bring Yahya Jammeh and the co-conspirators to justice.
Right, two quick questions. So are we able to identify the families that are going to be beneficiaries of these reparations? And while at that, if we are asking for justice, what exactly will justice mean in this context?
So we've been working with the victims' families since 2018. We've had engagements with them. Many of them are in the Ashanti region, Bronga-Hafo, and the Western region. So we have collected information. We have done intake for them. We have also been able to travel with some of them to the Gambia. And so we have the information. Along with that, many of them, when they were arrested, the police stations that they were taken to, they took information. So there's been a compilation and comparing some of the information. All of them, except 2 or 3 people, survived. So it is their families that are going to take the compensation on their behalf. So we have the list.
All right. Unfortunately, our connection to Mr. Nyako seems to be quite unstable. Oh, he's joined us in wrapping up. And kindly be brief for me. I was asking, what does justice mean? You're saying that the compensation is one part, then there's the justice that you're seeking against Yahya Jammeh. What would that be?
Yes, justice for the victims will mean that former President Yahya Jammeh, who is currently in Equatorial Guinea, will be brought to trial at the special court that is going to be created. It means that the 12 other co-conspirators will also be brought to trial. I have to say that there's been some progress made on that front, even though the court even hasn't sat. Three of these individuals had been seeking refuge in the US, Switzerland, and then Germany. One of them, Michael Correa, was jailed for about 68 years 2 years ago, due to our activity and collaborating with the US government. Also, Bilo, one of the drivers who drove the soldiers to go and kill the Ghanaians, another West African migrant, was sentenced to life imprisonment in Germany. He was hiding in Germany. And then also the third one, who was then the Minister of Interior at the time, Osman Sonko, was also sentenced to 20 years in prison in Switzerland. So we are drawing fences, ring fences around them. If those who leave the jurisdiction of the Gambia, we are able to locate and work with those countries to have them brought to trial. But finally, it is Yahya Jammeh and the other ones that are in Gambia, whom eventually the special court of the Gambia, which is to be set up, will be used to bring them
to justice. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon and helping us understand, especially for those who may not have known this subject. At least there is more to read on our website, 3news.com. We've been speaking to William Nyako, who is the Executive Director, Africa Center for International Law and Accountability, and also the coordinator for the Jammeh to Justice Ghana Coalition. You're still watching, not News 360, this is actually News Central. Stay with us. We have many more stories for you after this break, including the conversation about whether or not LGBT is back. An apology. We'll tell you who is making this apology and the way forward. Stay with us. Welcome back to News Central on TV3. Let's turn our attention to education. Now, the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, NACA, has moved to withdraw hard copies of the Senior High School Physical Education and Health Teachers Manual from circulation after concerns were raised about a section defining gender identity. The directive follows public debate over the wording of the definition, which NACA says should not have made it into the final teaching material now being used in some classrooms. A physical education teacher's manual defines gender identity as a person's deeply felt internal experience of gender, which may or may not correspond to the sex assigned at birth. It further states that gender may include being male, female, or a blend of both, and goes beyond the binary notion of gender as male and female, recognizing a diversity of gender experiences and expressions. This definition, captured in the Senior High School Physical Education and Health Teachers Manual, has created quite some confusion and public uproar. And as it stands, the Minister for Government Communications a few minutes ago actually said that he is being made aware of this particular issue and it has been withdrawn. So we'll in a moment speak to Christian Yali, who is our parliamentary correspondent now. He is going to be having an interview with the individual that actually drew public attention to this gender definition in the PE manual, the Physical Education Manual, where gender has been defined as male, female, or any other gender. It means there's a third. And that third is what the problem is, where many think it could be LGBT issues coming up back again. So let's now hear exactly what has been said about this.
Honorable, we have seen the Minister for Government Communications say that you are being overzealous and also you get carried away. But one thing he says is that you were in government when this was introduced into the curriculum. How do you respond to him?
That is most arrogant. You are voted to come to power, and the parent who voted for you, whose child you have introduced LGBT elements into their teaching and learning materials, teacher manuals, and being taught that they can have sexual pleasures and feelings very absurd, and gender should no longer be about male or female, and it's about whatever they feel, and they can even feel both, and you are poisoning their minds, hundreds of thousands of these children. And we have caught you red-handed and asking you to do the right thing. You are insulting us that we are being overzealous and we are being carried away. So the millions of parents who voted for you, whose children are in these secondary schools, whose taxpayers' money they used to pay you, you are using the taxpayers' money to pay yourself and to print textbooks that are LGBT-laced and poisoned. You deliberately introduce it in. You have been caught red-handed. You have admitted you are going to find a way to remove it. And you are telling these parents that they're overzealous and they are carried away. That is the arrogance of power. This is the most arrogant height that a government can ever express. But that is what Ghana has voted for. So parents, you have voted a government in power. And you voted them who campaigned on deception that they were going to protect you from LGBT elements. Now you vote them in power, they have printed teacher manuals with LGBT promotion, and when you ask them questions, they say you are overzealous and you are carried away. If it must take us, some of us, to be the watchdogs, to be the gatekeepers, and to be vigilant and be carried away and overzealous so that we will save the generation and the mindset and the values of our young generation, the young vulnerable ones, so that tomorrow LGBT, transgender matters, these absurdities that NDC wants to introduce into the constitution as they have proposed and have already introduced into the textbooks and into the classrooms are a thing of the past. You can call us names, but other parents, many thousands and millions of parents whose children are in Ghanaian schools will also be overzealous. And they will also be carried away. And they will do everything, I assure you, they will do everything to protect the sanity of their children.
And that's Reverend Intim Fojo. And like I indicated, the Minister in charge of Government Communications, Felix Kwachofosu, responded to the concerns about what was captured in the manual and says that the manual has been withdrawn, an apology has been issued, and that in the coming days we'll get to know what the next line of action will be, and we'll develop this story for you in subsequent bulletins as well. Away from that, the Ghana customs officials at the Takoradi port have intercepted a massive consignment of suspected illicit drugs concealed in two 40-foot containers following an intelligence-led operation at the Atlantic Terminal Services Limited terminal. The operation began after frontier officers detected unusual packaging patterns during routine checks. Their findings triggered an immediate alert to management. Acting swiftly, the sector commander for Takoradi, Walter Blankson, ordered the containers to be placed under tight surveillance to prevent interference. The containers were later fully unstaffed. The inspection was further reinforced by representatives from the Narcotics Control Commission, the National Security, the National Intelligence Bureau, the Food and Drugs Authority, and the declarant Maxwell Boateng. The operations led to the discovery of an estimated 25 million tablets of suspected illicit tapentadol and tamaking drugs concealed among cartons of ceiling fans, as well as thousands of undeclared electrical appliances. The tablets have since been seized, with samples taken by the customs chemist for laboratory analysis, while the remaining goods are being held at the state warehouse in Takoradi pending further investigations. Customs officials say that the success of the operation reflects the critical role of vigilant frontline officers and coordinated interagency collaboration in protecting Ghana's borders from illicit trade and its associated public health risks. The declarant, Maxwell Boateng, is currently being held by the Narcotics Control Commission, aiding in investigations heading to the owner of the containers. The Institute of Energy Securities, IES, has closely assessed recent public discussions, labor actions, and official communications surrounding government's proposed private sector participation in the operations of the Electricity Company of Ghana, ECG, and the Northern Electricity Distribution Company, NEDCO. The Institute of Economic Affairs stresses that the magnitude of ECG's financial and operational challenges, revenue leakage, technical and commercial losses amounting to over $1.5 billion cannot be overlooked, hence the need for privatized all aspects of operations of the ECG. In a moment, we'll speak to Derek Emmanuel Hatche, who is the Research and Policy Analyst at IAS. Mr. Hatche, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on News Central.
Thanks for the opportunity. Good afternoon.
Why is it that, I'm sure if you've followed conversations about what's happening between the Public Utility Workers Union and the ECG privatization, they are at variance. They disagree with any form of privatization or private sector participation in ECG. But from where you said we need that privatization or private sector participation, how do you break down this debate for us?
All right. Thanks once again. So first, let's not confuse privatization with private sector participation. The Institute for Energy Security is not in support of privatization of ECG. What the Institute for Energy Security is in support of is a private sector participation, because that private sector participation is trying to narrowly target all revenue mobilization, as well as metering, as well as loss reduction, and then operational efficiency. So we are in support of the private sector participation, and that is not the same as privatization. Considering the workers' union, or let me say the labor union, what they are also saying to a larger extent in terms of job security, in terms of transparency and co, it's also acceptable. But what we are saying is that there must be a constructive engagement where these two stakeholders can come into consensus, because we are looking at the national interest, we are looking at the long-term sustainability of the power sector, especially the ECG.
Right. And sorry for cutting in, they make the point that, and yesterday if you had listened to them, they said that private sector participation and privatization are one and the same. In fact, I'm actually quoting directly what they said. But I get the argument you make that they are two separate things. However, their concern they're also putting across is that ECG over the last few months has been able to generate revenue, put its house in order, and the work they are intended to do is going on well. So why then do you need an outsider, in this case the participation of a private sector, in what already is being done? What do you make of this argument?
All right. So to battle the first point, I cannot fault them for confusing privatization with private sector participation. The second part of the question was the improvement in ECG revenue mobilization. That is true, because for you to be able to improve your revenue from 900 million Ghana cedis on monthly basis to about 1.7 million Ghana cedis on monthly basis, that is quite significant. But you are looking at that as a target or as a standard against 2.5 billion Ghana cedis that is expected to be collected on monthly basis. That has not been achieved. And so far as you've not been able to achieve 100% efficiency in terms of revenue mobilization, then you've not been able to achieve your goal. In terms of transmission losses, distribution losses, those are still significant. But even though we've seen some improvement, what has been the issue is that at one period around 2016, there was a management in place. They were improving their revenue mobilization efficiency. Efficiency was on the rise, meaning that reduction in terms of losses was on the low. That was quite significant. But the past 4 years, we've seen the worst form of it, where distribution losses have to go above 40%. Revenue was below 50%. And so what it means is that when tomorrow these current managers who are having oversight responsibility are not at the helm of affairs, then it means that somebody can let things go away. But if you have a private sector participation in terms of bailing, in terms of metering, in terms of improving revenue mobilization, then they can be guaranteed against their standard. Even if there's a change of government, the power sector will continue to be viable in terms of cash flow, and that will help us to ensure the continuous supply of power for lives and livelihood.
All right, Derek Emmanuel Hatchet, thank you for your time. He's a research and policy analyst with Institute of Economic Studies. Thank you for your time. Certainly, it's a debate that will go on for some time. We'll see how all of this pans out in the coming days. We'll update you here on TV3. Let's turn attention to a bit of politics, because the NDC's national chairman, Johnson Asiedu Nketia, has criticized the previous Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo administration for excessive borrowing without corresponding development. Speaking during his thank you tour in the Sunafo North constituency of the Ahafo region, Mr. Asiedu Nketia said that many of the country's developmental challenges could have been avoided if the former government had delivered value for money. He noted that the Mahama-led government is committed to accountability, warning that individuals who misused state resources will be made to account for their stewardship. He also urged the people to be patient with the new administration as it rolls out policies to propel national development, promising the NDC will be prudent and accountable.
Minister for no do so broso. Mo ankabi. Eti President Mahama say oba obete so ama ya fa minister for do osian se mo nyina mo kabi. Ada no man ka say ya be fa minister 4,000. Chanka ya fa 1,000 anka mo nyina mbenya bia ya ayom tu akra ka benya mienu krawa. Oko ya no sa echese o man no be say ndi no Ghana for nto aba no mo. Nti ya ne Ghana for nyina ya adwen se ya ba ya be fa nipa kakra bi na de wo mo de ani mo am ya ya ntuma no. Na o man no ye yi a obi a ho beton. Akoye 60. Ya ne mo nyina na kan ye. Enu nti obi a wanya bi no. Ono so omani trimu nyanede. Ongunu se nipa a womo so fata se anka wombetimi edi minister no bi no. Womo doso.
Now, the Esunafo area is a cocoa hub for the region, and Mr. Seydou Nketia said that the government is taking steps to revive the ailing cocoa sector after years of mismanagement.
Said MPP for no, Eddie Cocoa Jumano Afaso. A yasem Cassia Pam or me. Nananom satam no crowd near Gina Fontaine ye count. By Yabejia Coyano near her cocoa board for Conta Muno. And Yakura Samika said, Womu Fra Coyaiso. Now, one more Cojibosia and the Cocoa Yanyante Akosia. The answer ya the akosia say 2025 we ya ti o man koko nyina emu be say 360,000 ya di kotua ka keke enti o de ko enya dia wakoton a odi hu sika e ba meto koko foforo o de akotua ka.
Sounds like he's in a campaign mode, isn't it? Right. Now, government has begun steps to ensure food supply to basic and senior high schools under the school feeding program and to ensure that it is nutritional and is of good value to the pupils. President Mahama in 2024 promised his government will effect the needed reforms which will ensure quality and promotion of local produce.
Concerns over quality of meal has many occasions dominated public discourse on the Ghana School Feeding Program, a landmark social intervention project introduced in 2005. Improving the quality of meals was a major area of focus on then-candidate John Mahama's campaign, now President of the Republic. With support from the World Food Program, the current administration has begun steps to improving nutritional value of foods supplied to basic and senior high schools under the school feeding program. Currently, the two institutions are piloting a local rice in some selected private and public schools. Over 100,000 students in public schools and in excess of 40,000 students in private schools, both basic and senior high level, have been captured under the current project. The Ashanti Regional Coordinator of School Health Education underscored the need to improving meal nutrition.
Some of the schools, and then we noticed that some of them were anemic, and some of them are even obese. With that aspect, there is a need for such a nutrition aspect to also come in to support, to ease the children from that situation.
Frank Obo, a farmer, was happy government and the World Food Program are prioritizing local content over imported ones.
Foreign rice is competing with the local rice. They're able to bring it here for so cheap. And so what is happening is that our local farmers, because they have to go for loans and all these things are high interest rates, they are not able to compete with the foreigners.
Well, on that note, we bring the bulletin to an end. So as the pupils you saw in that story are eating, it's time for lunch as well. So do have a good lunch. Thank you for watching. I am Martin Asiedu Date. Bye for now.